The Vethric engineering fleet arrived at Oreth Station with 9 certified repair drones, a senior engineer named Keth Ovar Dasas, and a 37-page incident protocol. I arrived with a toolbox, a thermos, and the kind of mild curiosity you develop after 15 years of being the only human on whatever platform is currently falling apart. The seal had been degrading for 11 days. I know because I was the one who noticed it first. A pressure variance in the secondary ring. A sound you could only hear if you put your hand flat on the conduit housing and stood very still. I filed the report. The station's automated systems flagged it as within tolerance. I filed it again. Same answer. On day 8, it stopped being within tolerance. That was when the Vethric fleet came. I want to be fair about this. The Vethric are not bad engineers. They are very good engineers. They have certification infrastructure that makes our own look like a filing cabinet in a supply closet, and their diagnostic drones are the kind of machines that can map a structural fault to 4 decimal places in under a minute. Ketho Vardas had a secondary eye plate that tracked 2 readouts simultaneously while he spoke, which I found impressive in the way that watching someone chew and breathe at the same time is impressive. Efficient, fully automatic. He walked past my toolbox on the way in and said nothing, but his third lower assistant, a young Vethric in a too crisp uniform, looked at it the way you look at a stray animal that's wandered into a clean room. I heard him say, "Pre-analytic," to someone behind him. I heard it because the Vethric don't modulate for human hearing ranges the way they think they do. I poured a second cup from the thermos and waited. The first drone took 11 minutes to complete its assessment and recommend a compressed seal injection at the primary junction. Standard fix, the assistant told me, when I asked. Works every time, on every class of platform in the Vethric registry. It failed in 4 minutes. The second drone recommended a thermal bonding matrix applied at 42 degrees over the outer housing lip. The assistant did not look at me while the second drone worked. Ketho Vardas did, once. His secondary eye plate was on the readout, but the forward-facing pair had a particular quality, patient, a little distant, that I recognized. It was the look of a man waiting for you to understand that you are not relevant to the situation. The thermal bond held for 9 minutes. Then the variance spiked. I put down my thermos. "I'd like to take a look at the secondary ring housing," I said. Ketho Vardasas consulted something on his data slate. "The situation is under active remediation by certified equipment," he said. "Non-compliant field modification is prohibited under Station Compact Article 14. I asked what Article 14 said exactly. He said it prohibited non-certified repair methodology on active structural components during remediation. I said the remediation didn't appear to be working. He said it was in progress. I said I understood, and I sat back down, and I watched the third drone fail. The variance at that point was sitting at 6.4 above nominal. The certified threshold for emergency protocol was 8. Ketho Vardas filed a Tier 2 structural report and dispatched a 4th drone. I had been on Oreth Station for 3 months at that point, longer than any of the Vethric engineers, longer than the station's last rotation of administrative staff, longer than the platform's own maintenance log had a continuous human entry. I knew what the secondary ring housing sounded like at 6.4. I knew what it sounded like at 7. I knew what it sounded like at 7.9, which was the sound it made the first time I filed the variance report and nobody answered. I opened my toolbox. Not the whole kit. Just the coupling flanges I had pulled from my hauler's secondary exhaust housing 2 months ago, which I'd been meaning to reinstall but hadn't because the exhaust was running fine without them, and a tube of Vethali brand sealant compound I had bought at a transit depot on Keth Varal for 11 credits because it worked on 3 different material classes and fit in my jacket pocket. Also a length of insulated wire rated for pressure contact and 4 steel clamps that I had bought for something else entirely and never used. The third lower assistant said, "Those components are not rated for this platform's material class." I said, "I know." He began to say something about Article 14. The 4th drone failed. I had my hand on the secondary ring housing at that point, flat-palmed, and I could feel the variance cycling, a low, rhythmic push, like something breathing wrongly. The junction wasn't cracked yet. But there was a stress fracture developing in the outer lip of the housing, invisible to sensors, because the fracture was propagating along the material grain, and the station's diagnostic grid was averaging its readings over 4-hour intervals. I had watched it for 11 days. I knew exactly where it was going. I fit the first coupling flange against the housing lip, then the second, overlapping the first by about 2 centimeters, not the way you're supposed to do it, but the way the fracture geometry required. I ran the insulated wire through both clamp eyes and tightened down, then the sealant compound along the seam, pressed in with my thumbnail, which is not in any certification manual I have ever read. Kethovar Das was watching. His secondary eye plate had stopped tracking the readout. I said, "Do you want me to stop?" He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "The 5th drone is prepared." I said that was fine, and I finished the second clamp line. The 5th drone began its assessment. The variance was sitting at 7.2. I stood up and wiped my hands on my jacket and poured the last of the thermos. The 5th drone recommended a pressure seal injection at the primary junction, same as the first drone. It failed in 3 minutes. The variance sat at 7.2 for 40 seconds. Then it dropped. 7.1, 7.0, 6.8. The flange assembly was redistributing the stress load along the housing lip the way I had expected it to, not elegantly, not by any certified method, but correctly. 6.4, 6.1. The fracture line stopped propagating. I could feel it through my boot sole, which is not how you are supposed to feel structural information, but there it is. Kethovar Das filed an incident report. I know, because his third lower assistant told me later, in the transit corridor, with the particular energy of someone sharing bad news. The report listed my method as non-compliant field modification. Outcome inconclusive, requiring certified review prior to documentation. He was very thorough about it. The sealant compound got its own sub-entry. I thanked him. I meant it. I went back to my hauler. I sat in the pilot seat and finished the last cold half-inch of the thermos and looked out the forward port at the station's outer hull, where the secondary ring housing ran along the lower brace, and where, if you knew where to look, you could just barely see the edge of the first coupling flange, pressed flat against the lip, holding. The Vethric fleet departed the next morning. 9 drones, Kethovar Das, and 37 pages of incident protocol. I filed the station's structural log from my console. 11 days of variance data, 4 decimal places. Every 40-minute manual reading I had taken since the first day I put my hand on that conduit. It was 51 pages. I had them. That's just what I did. The outcome column said, stable.